Hello, everyone, and welcome to the National Inventor Club. My name is Brian Freed. I'm the founder, and we have a very exciting lineup tonight. We have the John Tesh, which I'll explain everything that he's done, and I'm sure he's going to tell us more about what he's done from what I have. All right, so I know this is January. It's the 19th. We're in 2022. So I'm driving, and I said, you know what? We need, and this was in December, we need a pump up rah-rah type of inspirational meeting for January. I know we hear from engineers and prototypers and Alibaba, and we've had some phenomenal guests last year. But to start off the year, I'd like to have just some inspiration, something, whether it's life, business, your invention. Maybe we're stuck at some point. We want to get unstuck. And I was driving, I heard the radio, and there it goes again. Intelligence for your life. I'm listening to the radio. Every couple minutes, there's a break, and his syndicated show, Intelligence for Your Life, the John Tesh show, comes up, giving some great information. And I said, I know my audience would love this. National Inventor Club would love this. So I called up his agent and gave him a quick pitch on what we do and what we're about. And he said, I love it. Let's do it. So here we are. We have John Tesh. How you doing, John?
I'm well, thank you.
Thank you so much for showing up tonight, being a guest here with us. You're a true inspiration to many, many people. Even before we started this meeting, one of my friends just was ecstatic to meet you. So thank you again for doing what you do.
My pleasure.
John, you have a tremendous bio. I think when I first, or before I was calling you to come on here, I did some research, and I think maybe it was like 4 pages of a bio to be able to explain to you. But I'm sure by now, doing what you do, you probably have a good summary to be able to remind everybody of what you've done, if you don't mind. I mean, it's really about all the things that you've kind of done in your career along the way. You've really invented. If you don't mind just giving us a quick intro, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when we were first talking, I said, well, I'm not an inventor. Then I was talking to my son who works with me on the air. His name is Gib, and he was like, let me just list some of the things that you invented. And so it's, I think what's important to remember is that you mentioned it. I grew up in a place called Garden City, which is right around from where you grew up. And I was born in 1952. And during that period of time, there, of course, there wasn't any internet. There was no cell phones. There was one phone in the house, that kind of thing. So I was a very skinny, scrawny, just not attractive kid with braces and acne, Clearasil all over me. And my dad was, he was from World War II. He was an amphibious assault commander in the Navy. And so, I was the third kid. I was 11 years younger than my 2 sisters. And so when I came along, it was like, oh gosh, here we go again. So, they put me in this finished basement. I spent most of my time there where my dad and mom were like throwing parties and stuff like that. And, back in the day, your parents didn't know everything about you. The rule was that you go about your business and then you come home when the street lights are on, So I was left, and since I was not one of the popular kids in Garden City High School, which is a powerful high school to this day, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute because it has bearing on this. I spent a lot of time in the basement tinkering, and so I bought a Heathkit radio project and made my own radio broadcast station. I had a reel-to-reel tape recorder that my dad had bought, and there was a piano down there. So I was always making things and creating things and just trying somehow to get noticed, right? And then, Garden City, even if you look at it now, it's really a performing arts school. I didn't realize that when I was in it, but the opportunities for being in a band, being in a garage band, I was the editor of the college, the photo editor of the high school yearbook, and so there were a lot of opportunities to be creative in that time. But I do think that I had the gift of imperfection, where I just wasn't great in school. I was okay. I was sort of scared of my own shadow. And I know there are people who are watching right now who understand that, because back in the day, being a geek, being a dork, being a kid like me that brought the projector to the science class, it wasn't cool. It wasn't cool to be in a marching band. I was in that too. Nowadays, all those things are cool. But it also enabled you to sort of trying to develop a way out, invent yourself, so to speak. And so when I went to college, my parents stuck me at North Carolina State to study textile chemistry because my dad worked for Haynes, and I was just miserable. And so I took a radio and television course, and I got bit by that bug where you could work for one day and you could turn something in, and so I wanted to change my major, and I went to all of my professors to sign the drop ad card because I was past the drop ad date. And this is actually, I wrote a book called Relentless, and this story is in there in more detail because it's important to what happened to me. And one of my teachers wouldn't sign the drop ad card, and so on advice from a fraternity brother, I forged his signature on the drop ad card. And as luck would have it, he found out. He reported me to the university. I was thrown out on an honor code violation. I was suspended indefinitely, and then my parents, which didn't surprise me, my dad threw me out of the house. And so at 19 and a half years old, I was homeless living in a park in Raleigh, North Carolina. And when you get to that point, and you can get to that point in many different ways, you can be stuck mentally, you can be stuck spiritually, you can be stuck physically. I was stuck in all of those those areas. And so I realized after about 3 months in the tent that my dream at that moment was to get into the media, and that I had to find a way to get into a radio station. And every station I went to said, you need a demo tape. And I didn't have a demo tape because I didn't have a job. It was really a catch-22. And so I found a way to break into the campus radio lab because I was already a criminal. And I made a fake demo tape where I did the traffic report. Hey, this is John Tesh, WKIX 2020 News. And I held my nose and did the imitations of all the correspondence and all of that. And I took that tape, and it was one of those things of, I went overboard. I did a 30-minute demo tape doing all the voices. I did the theme on the piano. I used a typewriter to make it sound like a teletype, and did it all live into a reel-to-reel tape. And then I took that tape to radio stations, to 10 radio stations. And I got a call about a month later from a guy named Scott White, who I still stay in touch with. And he said, "Is this John Tesh?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, there was laughter in the background. And he said, "Did you make all these noises and do all this stuff on this tape?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, if you want a job that badly, I'll give you a job playing the religious tapes on Sunday mornings from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. And I got my foot in the door. And, long story short, 36 months after that, I was a CBS News correspondent in the same building as Walter Cronkite at 23 years old in New York City. And the reason I tell you that story, and I tell this story on stage when I'm in concert too, is that there is a way in. You have to figure out what the way in is, and then you have to do the work. Because there are plenty of people who will go and they'll go say, "I need a job, and these are my," but when you show up with something and people are able to see your grit and your persistence, and those of you who are watching, I'm going to mention a couple of books that can really change your life. So you should be writing them down because they're really quite amazing. One of them is called Focus by Al Ries. The other is Differentiate or Die. Differentiate or Die by Jack Trout is a way to figure out which lane you should be in, whether you're an inventor or you're a songwriter or you're an author. And nowadays, right, Brian, nowadays you can use Keyword Explorer or TubeBuddy or vidIQ on YouTube, and you can see what's going on, and you can see what's being overserved, superserved, and you can whatever you are interested in, you can see if there's a tangent, if there's an intersection between what you're interested in and what's popular right now. So these are amazing tools that didn't exist back in the day.
It's very interesting, and that's the thing. You have certain points in your life that you need to make decisions for. So you had that aha moment where you had to make a change. And many of us, John, we come up with an idea. It's not like we woke up and said, we're going to be an inventor and this is our full-time job. This is something that we have our careers, we have things that are going on in our life. and we come up with this invention, and now it's something that maybe it can change our life. Is it something that could be residual income for us? Is it something that can actually be our full blown income? And then we have to make some decisions on what we're going to do and going through those steps. So just like you had to get yourself up to move your idea of what you wanted to do forward. That's what we have to do. Again, whether it's anything in life or business or your invention, just picking that lane. And I know that one of the audience members that are on, Sean Taylor, she always says, I'm in my lane. I'm going in my lane, right, Sean? I see you on here. So
Well, I'll tell you that I have a friend, my wife and I met, and my daughter met a kid named Lin-Manuel Miranda after we saw a Broadway show that he won a Tony for called In the Heights. And then I got invited to go to the Public Theater in New York a few years back to see 250 people watch Hamilton. And I went backstage and talked to him. And I mean, it was like, he's like, what did you think? Do you think we have something? And I'm like, what? You have Sergeant Pepper's is what you have, right here. But he did an interview on 60 Minutes, which is exactly what you were just talking about, where he was asked, there's so many, when you went to school at Hunter College, there were so many kids and there's so many people in the theater business that have so much more experience than you and have so much more success. Why you? Why did you end up creating this thing that's bigger than any show that's ever been on Broadway? And he said, I picked a lane and I didn't come out of it. And he said, there were times when I wanted to go out with my friends. There were times when I wanted to be with my wife at a dinner party. And there were times when I wanted to get more than 3 hours of sleep. But I knew that I had something and I stayed in the lane and I made that commitment. So Angela Duckworth wrote a book called Grit, which I highly recommend. And,
that's a good one.
And there's another part of my life where in 2015, I was given 18 months to live with a horrible cancer diagnosis. And so the same lane that I chose to get out of that pup tent and get onto to CBS News and to do a public television special when nobody would sign me up on their record label, and a public television special that we raised $20 million for public television and started my music career. But it was that same grit and persistence that I had to use with my wife as my advocate to get on the other side of cancer. And so the picking the lane thing is a great metaphor, because if you can stay in that lane, and then you can also see the finish line, and you have to be able to visualize that finish line. I mean, you can really accomplish anything. And I wrote down a few things while you were talking, because, nowadays it's the biggest mistake I think you can make as an inventor or as a creator, like just the same thing, is not understanding that it might be amazing what you've created, but you also have to learn how to be a marketer. You have to learn how to promote. You have to understand everything about all the tools that are available to you, and these are all taught online on YouTube. If you're one of those guys or girls, gals that stays in your basement and invents something that is useful, and you get a trademark and all the rest of that stuff, it's just like me when I was trying to get a record deal. I had released one record. And then I was like, well, why is it not selling? Why is it not in the stores? Well, there's no reason for people to go in there and buy it. Nobody knows anything about it, John. Then it was like, oh gosh, now what I have to do is I have to do what the Three Tenors did or what Yanni did. I have to create an event. And so I think that, the joy of invention, reinvention of a person, or creating something to make the world better or easier for people is great. But understanding how to reach people, maybe with your own podcast or maybe with a YouTube video, or maybe with a Kickstarter campaign, something like that. Those are all things that we all need to know how to do now.
Yeah, there's so many times, John, where people come up with their idea, and like you said, they might lock themselves in a basement, or they have their idea locked in their head and not really knowing what to do to be able to protect themselves, so that you do the best that you can to protect yourself, to get it out there, to bring it along the steps. Otherwise, it's going to be a couple years later and you're going to see it out there, right, and it's woulda, coulda, shoulda situation. So
Yeah. Yeah.
just
Well, and look at one more thing. Look at Steve Jobs, right? Steve Jobs was okay. So he had a lot of he wasn't really a coder, right? But he had a vision for what he wanted to do, but he also learned how to be a master salesman. I mean, he was really like P.T. Barnum, you know. He could sell iPods and all of that stuff before it even existed, you know. And he just knew that he needed to stay in his lane. In fact, he never even he never did any focus grouping for his products. He just said, I know in my heart that this piece of gear, this iPod, it holds 10,000 songs or whatever, is something that people are going to use, and he bet the farm on it, obviously, but then he also knew how to market it.
Between the success that you've had, John, what do you think is really the traits to being a successful entrepreneur, inventor? Because really, when we come up with an idea, John, we're almost like we're starting a business. You have your due diligence, you have your research, you have the steps to bring it to a point. You need a plan, right? So it's a business plan. So when you come up with an idea, even if it's from scratch, it's a business. So what do you think is common traits from between your success and others that you can help us with keeping our ideas moving forward?
There's a great book. I said I was going to mention some books. There's a great book called The Pixar Way. In the Pixar company, they had a ban on whiteboards. You were not allowed to have a whiteboard in your office or anywhere else. Their whole thing was fail quickly, and so all of the pictures that you see. I mean, they threw out Toy Story 2. They tested it. It tested horribly. They threw it out and they started over. They failed quickly and they started over. Their story is all about not only hard work but turning something in. One of the big mistakes that people I have worked with in the past, I see them making, because I used to make the same mistake, is that they research themselves to death, right? Because if you just keep getting, there's so much research out there now, it's so easy to get to. If you just keep researching, then you don't have to turn it in. You don't have to turn it in because you're not done yet, right? So you just keep. It happens with people writing novels as well. They say, oh, I'm just going to research this character, you know, and then, but if you never turn anything in, and if you don't get that practice, that muscle, then you probably will never make it. So the commonality that I see in a lot of these people that I've interviewed, and listen, I worked for, you know, CBS News for 8 years. I worked for CBS Sports and NBC Sports and the Olympics for 12 years. And so I've interviewed everybody from Franz Klammer to Lance Armstrong and Jimmy Connors and everybody in between, right? There is a sameness to all of these people, because at a certain level, your physical ability is right about the same. When you get to be a world-class anything, whether it's a downhill skier or I guess even you're an inventor, right? Or you're a billionaire. The smarts and the level of expertise are usually right about the same, at the same place, the same level. But the people who win are the ones who risk. And they're also the ones who can see their future. There's a great scripture in the Bible that says, God calls forth those things that be not as though they were. You know, Abraham didn't see himself at all as the father of many nations, of all nations. God saw him as that. And if you can see yourself, you can see the end of where your ideas are going. You can visualize that. Then you'll get there. But people like Denzel Washington, one of my favorite interviews, even Telly Savalas, Sting, you know, Peter Gabriel and Eric Clapton, Billy Joel, you know, to mention somebody from Long Island, and John McEnroe. These guys will all tell you that it's hard work. It's just so much hard work. It's just a withering amount of hard work. Even to this time, I mean, I'm going to be 70 years old in July, and I still turn in 36 hours of radio a week and do 20 concerts a year. And now we're working on actually teaching courses and things, because because it's that if you keep turning things in, you learn more about it.
When we come up with ideas, there's almost like an emotional feeling that we get, and we're so excited. What do you think? How do you look at that, John? So there's emotion, and then there's making good business decisions or better business decisions. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you get, I mean, personally, I feel like if you get bogged down with business decisions, that it'll destroy your, you know, your creativity. And people are like, wait a second, someone's going to steal my idea. I say, okay, fine, but the I've never been. My wife may disagree, but I've never really been full of myself. I've never really thought I was all that good at anything. And so, if you look at my career, if you would come see me live in concert, you'll see the most amazing band you've ever seen, because that's who I hire. And nowadays with the gig economy, you can find attorneys. I just booked for a half hour an attorney. His name is Ian Corzine, who is an expert on NFTs and crypto. I just spent, you know, an hour talking to him because he's an expert. There are so many experts out there that can help you. And so now this time for an inventor, there's never been a better time. But I'll also tell you that everything that I've done, whether it was putting together a public television special, starting my own record company that we ended up selling for $11 million, starting this radio show that reaches 7 million people every week still, you know, it has Fortune 500 advertisers. With any of that stuff that I created, I went and found the people who were the best at it, and I cold called them. Either that, or I read their book. One of the first books I ever read was Houdini. You know, I mean, as a little kid, all the information is out there, and there's a great book, probably my favorite book to mention today, which is Austin Kleon's Steal Like an Artist. Steal Like an Artist, and it's like, wait a second, I don't want to steal anybody's stuff. It's not about that. It's about figuring out what you want to do, and then look at the people who have done that and done that at a high level, and study them, study everything about them, and then try to emulate them. You'll never get there, but you'll get there you'll get far enough as your own person that all of a sudden you'll start absorbing their traits. So for me, it was Rick Wakeman from Yes, the keyboard player, and Oscar Peterson, the great jazz player for, you know, in music for announcers. It was actually a guy that's still on the air now in New York, I believe, Chuck Scarborough. When I was a kid, I used to study him. I had all of his tapes, and I would emulate the way he spoke, and all of these things. And all of a sudden, when you start emulating all of these people, you'll start seeing everything. You'll start seeing the playing field differently, and that's really what it is with creativity. When you'll see things differently, and then just spending time alone in quiet and listening. You know, and I mean just listening to nothing, listening to birds, meditating. We're always consuming so much stuff. I make this mistake myself, but then when I go for a nice long walk, all of a sudden, like, wait a second, this is really what I should be doing on stage, or this is what I should do on the radio show. You know, when the Intelligence for Your Life was created, when radio stations were full of programs, you know, countdown shows and love songs at night or whatever. And I looked at that playing field and I said, what is it? What am I interested in? I'm interested in curated information, the best information out there from the highest sources. And I'm interested in being on the radio. So I combined those two things, and I said, well, if I can hire a staff that will curate what they'll take 5,000 word articles and turn them into 250 words, and then surround them with music, it might be a radio show. And we started with my executive producers, Scott Myers and Betsy Chase, on like 5 stations. And we kept testing it, and we would prototype it, and we would change it, and we would add a little bit, and stations would try to sign up, and we said, no, we're not ready yet. Let us continue to tweak it. And so, very similar to what I think of what an inventor would come up with.
So, for those of you who listen to the radio, and I know that you have it on your website also, which you could share, but all of a sudden, like, there would be a break after the music that you're listening to, and all of a sudden John has Intelligence for your life different types of inspiration and tips and tricks and all kinds of trendy type of things. And it's really interesting. And you also have the John Tesh Show. Is that the same as Intelligence for Your Life?
Yeah, the John Tesh radio show, Intelligence for Your Life, is what it is, and it's on. You can find, if you just go to tesh.com, which is our website. There's a station finder that's in there, and a lot of what we do is we have a mantra that we live. I actually have it on my phone here. What does it say? Well, first of all, one of the things we say is, if it doesn't make you better, healthier, happier, or much more interesting, we won't put it on the show. But also this, and I have this as my homepage, what is the direct perceived benefit? That's a question that all of us on this, watching this and broadcasting, should be asking when we create anything. What is the direct perceived benefit of what I'm inventing? What is the direct perceived benefit of doing my radio show? People will pick up a tip that'll make their life better. Everything that you create, I believe, should be able to answer. You should be able to answer that question. What is the direct perceived benefit? Because what people are looking for now is they're looking to get out of pain, whatever that is, whatever their pain point is. If you're creating something that's interesting, it won't last very long. But if you're creating something that actually gets people out of that cures a pain point for them, and that has benefit for them, and that's that's a huge list of what anybody can create, then you've got something.
You use intellectual property, you use copyrights, you use trademarks.
Oh yeah, I mean, yes. I think that one of the mistakes I made back in the day was, I get an idea and I was like, let's create a website. Let's go to GoDaddy and create go for a website like that. It doesn't guarantee you any success. Just like having a record in the stores doesn't guarantee you any success. It's if the product is great and you're finished, you're done with it, right? And you can send it out there. It will literally sell itself as long as you give it position where it needs to be. Of course, you have to protect everything with trademark and copyright. But yeah, I mean, there's still so many opportunities out there because look at just what happened with the pandemic. People who created businesses, for better or for worse, out of that. And there are so many people right now. If you want to know an area that is increased 1,000-fold, it is digital courses. And there are plenty of entrepreneurs and inventors who are listening to us right now, Brian, who are like, okay, well, I got to think of what should I do for right now? Well, while you're coming up with the next big invention, there's probably something that you know how to do that you can teach and teach what you know. And while you're doing that, you'll have good, consistent passive income while you're creating your next big thing.
Excellent. John, thank you for your time, your inspiration, your wisdom, your continuous advice, and everything that you do on the radio. It's just so much fun to hear you, and just something that just you didn't think about until all of a sudden it's like, okay, you know what? John's got some pretty good things out. I'm going to follow what he says. So thank you again. You could go to tesh.com, easy enough.
Yeah.
And you could do like I did. You have a subscriber list on there, so I can keep in touch with what you have going on.
Absolutely.
And there's all videos and very interesting things on his website. John, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks.
And keep on inventing.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thanks. Okay. And for those of you who joined us tonight, thank you very much. And remember, February 24th, we have ThomasNet. So if you're looking for local resources in the U.S. for manufacturing, finding different products, services that are in the U.S., they are going to help us with going through and navigating the Thomas registry that's online at thomasnet.com. So very exciting guest. There are other guests that I have coming up for 2022 I'm really excited about. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and keep on inventing. Have a great night.